And my particular improvement, maybe I don't need to tell you, but those who say it's a quantum event that does the decision are in trouble. And I want to point out that it's never been one quantum event, one decision, because I have calculated that there are of the order of millions of trillions of quantum events in the brain at all times. And the question is, which one of them might actually be involved in making some randomness? And that's going to be a neuroscientific question in the end. But it's not some quantum events. Most of them, though, are ignored and averaged over, and we're mostly stable individuals. That's going to be my contribution. And I'm talking to molecular biologists about this, and this is a big part of my talk in Spain. I also want to say a thing that I think James appreciated from the beginning. The problem of free will is not just the problem of free will. It's the problem of whether we can be creative. Because what does it mean to be creative if the thing you created was already known at the Big Bang and the origin of the universe? Creativity is novelty, and it requires a freedom just like the freedom that's needed in order for us to have a will that we can say gives us our responsibility. And so it turns out that it's noise in my model, my information philosophical model. We normally suppress this noise. Some of us may suppress it all the time. Never want to even suggest a new idea that they didn't get from their parents or their culture. But they have that possibility, is what James is telling us, and there's room for lots of ideas. I believe in a way that we are perhaps most free when we let the noise in, when we dream, perhaps, or when we imagine, or when we create. That's an expression of our freedom. So to sum up, free will is incompatible with predeterminism, and it's incompatible with indeterminism if that indeterminism is right there in the choice and made it for us, so to speak, although we could flip a coin, says Bob Kane, and if we had two sides of a torn decision, great reasons for doing either one, if we flip a coin, he says, and I agree, we can say we were responsible either way. And that's his great 45-year theory of freedom, is that you can flip a coin as long as you've got good reasons for going either way. It's a small contribution, but it isn't the level of William James' contribution and these other 11 scholars. So I also want to say that although it's incompatible with predeterminism and incompatible with randomness if it was in the choice, except for Bob Kane, it's compatible with a limited indeterminism, where the indeterminism stops at giving you possibilities. And then an adequate determinism. What do I mean by that? I mean the adequate determinism that we use to send men to the moon using Newtonian laws, which we know are wrong at the microscopic level, but they don't get involved. And once people ask me, how could they be involved in the brain if they don't affect the planets? And it's just a matter of large numbers and size and other things which are rather scientific and technical. So I am thinking that maybe compatibilist philosophers, who right now call themselves compatibilists, and in surveys of the Academy, something like 2/3 of philosophers, professional philosophers, the kind that James distanced himself from, describe themselves as compatibilists. It's the most popular position. So my goal is to say, well, you know what? What is compatibilism? It's compatible with determinism. So I'm going to say, well, William James, 125 years ago, showed that it's also compatible with indeterminism. And that's a broader, it's a both, as a phenomenist thinking. Let's say we're compatible with determinism, limited of course, and we're compatible with indeterminism, limited of course, and they can go right on calling themselves compatibilists. They don't have to say, gosh, I got that wrong all these years. They can say, I knew we needed some compatibilism with determinism because I wanted my decisions to be causally related to my character, my values, and so forth. And that was a very good reason. My friend Kane says, don't talk about compatibilism, Bob. They'll never understand you. And he suggested a term, and I think I can give compatibilists what they need, namely the amount of determinism or determination that connects their character. And I think our model will provide that determination. But will compatibilists ever accept our limited indeterminism from quantum physics? Most of them know quantum physics is a serious theory and probably true. They can't cope with it, basically. So I say, let's correct it. Let's say free will is compatible with determinism, but it's only the adequate determinism of today's use of Newton's laws when they work. But say that it will give us that determination. The other correction we need to say, and this is William James, is that it's compatible with some chance, the limited indeterminism for new ideas that generate the alternative possibilities. And Bob Kane said, after I've been on the phone with him quite a few hours going around possibilities and way of writing about all of this. He and I will write an article together, I hope, after the second edition of the Oxford Handbook goes to the Oxford Press, in which he has now promised to put the two-stage model in the new edition. So I feel it's a great accomplishment. Even though I haven't got him convinced of my way of thinking, at least he's going to talk about it. He said, hey, let's call it, I was calling it something else, corrected compatible. I had some phrase. He said, how about comprehensive compatible? Sounds nice. It means both. And now a pluralistic person would think both sounds good to me. They play their roles. And the two are the adequate determinism and for the determination by our reasons, and the limited indeterminism that James wants us to have in order to have new possibilities. But then he said, Bob, don't do comprehensive compatibilism. It will confuse the talk that's in the field. And so many people would be confused that we will not make progress. I'll think of a better phrase once we write our paper. Well, I told him, I'm going to talk about it to the William James people. I think they'll understand both. Don't worry about it. So we come back to the chapter on will that Bob Richardson described to us this morning, in which James said, free will, if it existed, he had a section in the chapter on will called The Question of Free Will, and it's his most direct statement. Years after, 15 years or whatever, after, at least 16 years after 1884. No, really, it's only 6 years after the dilemma lecture. If it existed, could only be to hold some one ideal object or part of an object a little longer or a little more intensely before the mind. Amongst the alternatives which, here he is, years later, present themselves as genuine possibles, it would thus make one of them effective. His model of how we work in the world is that lots of possibles come to us. And at every moment, whether we're deciding what you ordered for lunch today, or whether you're thinking about your future life and just doing something extremely important and momentous, whichever it is, it's always seeing the things that present themselves and making one effective. And I thought this was a wonderful line from him. I wanted to sink it into your heads. He said, what's going on in the brain is so minuscule, we hardly know it. He said, and although such quickening of one idea might be morally and historically momentous, if considered dynamically, it would be an operation amongst those physiological infinitesimals which calculation must forever neglect. I'm going to put this line in the face of the computational model mind builders where the brain is a computer and it's computing everything and it's doing everything we think we're doing, because here's James telling us that the tiniest little thing could be made effective. And if it was made effective, it could become morally and historically momentous. And to conclude what I want to say, my answer to James' question about free will. His will to believe in free will, William James. Notice the use of William. There's something, this guy was driven in part by his name. May have been physiologically infinitesimal dynamically. That little decision in 1869 to dump his depression, geez, say, maybe I could make a difference in the world. Why don't I just believe I can and see what that does for me? That little physiological infinitesimal was indeed morally and historically momentous. But most of my colleague philosophers do not know that at this time, and I'm counting on you to help spread the word, because amongst the many free will alternatives which present themselves as genuine possibles, as he said, is my hope that you members of William James Society and others here will help me make his idea of a two-stage model effective in the world. So thank you very much. And then we've got some time. Thank you.